Christoph Trapp. Named a top 20 storytelling podcast and a top 5% podcast globally, Christoph chats with thought leaders and experts to share tips and tricks that can help you tell your company's stories better to drive business results. Available wherever you listen to podcasts, live streamed on major social media channels, and part of the DB&A television network, available on most U.S. television sets and streaming on Roku and Amazon Fire. Here's Christoph with today's episode. Let's go.
Let's go, business storytellers. Hey, how's everyone doing? Today we want to talk about crappy websites, or maybe websites that can be better, that are less than perfect, so to speak. Sometimes, I see websites and it's the usability. It's horrible. They're horrible to use on the web. It's not set up correctly. It's not, the best practices aren't followed. And sometimes it's the copy. The copy is crap. From typos to the wrong words to superlatives. I think you guys all know my opinion when it comes to superlatives, right? This is the best podcast ever. This is the best haircut ever. This is whatever. I'm the industry leading podcaster according to my marketing team, right? So what kind of language should we actually use on the website? What kind of language works? What makes sense? So I asked to come on the show Todd Jones. He's a strategic storytelling expert for companies that have the disease of message confusion. Let's find out what Todd has to say about that topic. Todd, welcome to the show. Give me a fist bump here. That's how we do it today.
Did I do it
right? There's no right or wrong how you fist bump. That's, as long as you don't smack the camera, we're good to go. Hey, so tell me about when it comes to websites, is that just my perception that there's just a lot of crappy, less than perfect websites out there when it comes to copy?
Yeah, I'd say even the best ones have problems, right? So, because nothing's perfect. But yeah, I think there are a lot of room for improvement. And, we're talking about copywriting, but you mentioned a lot of things that also go into that with usability, accessibility, which is another issue. Just copywriters are more than just word writers. So we'll look at the entire website, and we can really dissect different parts of the website. And actually, my background before I ever started writing website copy was building websites, so know a little bit about that as well. And so definitely a lot of companies could. I think the biggest problem with copy for websites is the lack of clarity, and probably comes back to the company not being clear themselves about who they are and what they do.
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, you do have to be clear yourself, right? When what you're going to talk about, what's unique about your company, and we can dig into that a little deeper. But how about the whole process? Like, how do you come up with clear copy? And I'm just thinking about, crappy workflows. I mean, this is a record-breaking show today, the amount of times I've mentioned crappy. But there's so many out there, like so many workflows where people go to content creators and say, I need a piece of content. Yeah. Like, what does that mean, right? I need some copy for the website, and somebody else already built the website. Nobody talked to you about what's the plan, right? Don't get me started on lorem ipsum, like that shouldn't be a placeholder. You should talk about that. So how do companies even start getting better copy, better content on their website that makes sense to the end user?
Well, if you're a company and you're having a website built right now, like if that's in the next 3 to 6 months, and you're going to engage a web developer or a company like that, bring up copy from the very beginning. They will tell you whether they can do that or not. In most cases they can't, but in some cases they'll have a copywriter on team, or they'll work with a copywriter. But I like to say that copywriting really has 3 parts to it that are almost equal, really. You have the research, the strategy, and the writing. And the writing is more than just writing. There's also editing. You need copy editing as well as just making sure that it's grammarly. That app has become a verb in our vernacular, but your grammar is correct. You've spelled all your words correctly. Those kinds of things, and those particular things are easy to slip through the cracks if you're not. I think whatever you do, have an extra set of eyes, because we see what we're wanting to see, what we need to see, and we miss those little, misspell something by one letter or whatever, or we mean to say one word, we say a word, but we meant the other variation of the word, like two and two, those kinds of things. And so an editor and a copy editor can help with that. A copy editor, their goal is to help you be clear, concise, and compelling. So they will streamline that. You may need a brief. Some copywriters will request a brief if you're working with a copywriter. They want to know important, crucial details like, who is your target audience? What are the problems you're solving for that target audience? What are the features of your product or service? And what are the benefits of those features? And, some of those types of things, which are crucial. I call it your messaging compass. It is like a compass for writing the copy for the website. I do like to say that on your website, you tell two stories. The first story is your customer story. So what is that customer journey? What does that story look like? What are the features and benefits? What sold them on your product or service? The other story is your own story. And those stories have to connect, because your story has to be relevant to their story. Otherwise, it's just a story. It's irrelevant. So it has to be strategic. So those are some starting points, I think. If you're building a website. Now, if you've already built the website, you can go back and engage a copywriter, or we talk about market research. That's kind of a fancy name, but you really need to do the research for the things I talked about for the messaging compass. What are the features of our product or service? What are the benefits of those features? What is the emotional connection? Who is our target audience? Ultimately, you're gonna come up with a unique value proposition with it. There's I think I say 4 questions: who am I? What do I do? Who do I do it for? And how do I do it differently? If you can answer those 4 questions, you can begin to put together your unique value proposition.
I think especially the how do I do it differently question is very difficult, because there's so much crossover, and everybody kind of does similar things, right? When you look at marketers and storytellers out there, and the storytellers, and everybody kind of does similar things, but slightly different. What I found interesting, Todd, you talked about 3 things when to get started. Only one included writing part, and I think people forget about that. How writing is certainly part of it, because otherwise you're not going to have any copy. But you need to think about what you're going to do, why you're going to do it. So you talked about research and strategy. Talk about research. How do we figure out what we should be doing? And of course, I'd be remiss to not mention voxpopme.com. Check them out. Director of Content Strategy there. A SaaS platform for you to do asynchronous surveys with your customers, so they can answer your questions on their own time through video feedback. Check that out, voxpopme.com. Is that the kind of research you were talking about, or did you have something else in mind?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And it may be that the best way to find out those questions about what are you should know what the features of your product or services. And I've looked for a definition for this, and I've struggled to find that. But when you think about a product, you think about software. Okay, software as a service. They often talk about, here are our features. You have a dashboard, and you can view this, and those are features. But what does that mean? How does it connect? That's something that that's probably an internal research situation there. But really, in the copywriting world, we talk about voice of customer research. It's a fancy word for knowing what your customer says about you. And the best way to do that is surveys, interviews. So I have a friend named Adrienne Barnes who's really good at doing the survey, and then she really has informed a lot of what I do. She talks about it from the jobs to be done framework. I like to talk about what is the story? What did it take for your customer to get to where they bought your product or service? What was going on before? There's a story there. Find out what that story is. What was it like when they decided to choose you? What is it like when they worked with you? And after, what is it like? What is that story? And you can really do it with interviews and surveys. You can also do what we like to call data mining. If you've got good enough reviews, and reviews and testimonials are not always that great, really. They tend to be the superlatives, right? Scott was great and Scott did this and what. I mean, it's just not really always good. But sometimes if they have good reviews, you can mine through that and pick out the things that obviously connected with the customer. So that is definitely one aspect of the research I would do. You have to research what the customer says about you, what their story was. I think another aspect of research is researching internally. What are those things? You talked about how we do it differently. That is a huge thing. That can be your positioning as a company. So coming from the web development, web design community, there's hundreds of them out there. And I tell them all the time, how do they choose you how do they choose you over the next person? What is the difference? You guys all look the same. So one of the ways you can do that is by your process. You have a process. Maybe you've branded the process. Maybe your differentiation or what you do differently is how you approach what you do. Those are some things that's kind of like internal research. This is how we are different. And so that would be kind of, it's really kind of, it can be in depth, really. If you talk about doing both internal and external research.
I do personally think research is so important because otherwise, how do you know what people even think and how they feel about your brand and even the problem you're trying to solve? I mean, I've done that a number of times in my career, and sometimes it's as simple as changing the wording. I mean, I'll give you an example. I had the Authentic Storytelling Project, which in theory makes a lot of sense, but that's not really what anybody calls it. That's not really what anybody uses. And so it was time to change that at some point. And if I would have done research before I started it, maybe I wouldn't have even gone down that road, or maybe I was so far ahead that it was still a good experience. It was still a good learning experience, but certainly that could have helped. Now there's different types of copy on the website though, right? Because you have copy for different parts of the funnel. So if, for example, if a blog post, I mean, I'm not necessarily trying to convert you, even though if you want to convert, fine, I'm happy to push you down the funnel. But at the end of the day, right, that's very different copy. That's SEO more than trying to explain. So how do you kind of explain the features and benefits of somebody who's actively looking for your product? How do you kind of wrangle the different types of content that a website has, and for the different pieces of the customer journey?
Well, me personally, I'm going to start with what I call the artery pages, the home, the about, and the service product pages. Those are the things and then yes, you have different parts of the funnel, if you will. And content marketing is in itself, its own industry. And actually, SEMrush just came out with a fantastic, top 100 content marketers. A lot of good people, and some of them are actually copywriters, just like plain copywriters on there, conversion copywriters. But I think that doing content in the blog article realm, there are different objectives for it. You certainly have the ones that the objective is SEO, get traction for a certain keyword phrase that you're trying to, like business storytelling. You would want to be doing that. So, you would create content around that. I think also what a lot of people don't do in the B2B space sometimes, or maybe they do it too much, but is what is the culture of the company? If you have a bigger company, you're trying to connect. I think you want to try to connect with your audience, the people who are your customers, and you want to try to connect with them a little bit. I'm not saying like overdo it, but certainly you can do articles that kind of support the culture or support the values that your company has. That's one thing you can do. And then I think a big and often overlooked thing in the content space is case studies. Actually, I refer to them as customer success stories. I think that is a huge gap that a lot of B2B companies have. And if they do make them, it's very data driven and boring. So I prefer the customer success story. Tell that story. There's going to be numbers in there, but the ideal is to show a before, during, and after. You're making a progression. You're showing how their customer's life changed or how their business changed because they worked with your product. And that can be a blog post, actually. And I've even seen some companies turn that over to guest posts with somebody who used their product and how this big, long, detailed post about, what they did, some campaign they did, and they used the product and the results they had. Case studies are just very interesting, can be very interesting pieces of content that you can utilize. And you can have it for the blog post. You can also have it for just like evergreen content that you put on your website. So I think, and I'm a proponent these days of more medium and bottom funnel content in the article, because I think that I've said this before to some of my friends, top funnel content, I'm not sure, somebody may vehemently disagree with me, but I don't know that there's anything else to write, right? I mean, you take a keyword phrase like storytelling in business or whatever, that's been written and dissected 100 times, 1,000 times at the top of the funnel, right? You can do all that. But if you're trying to get people into your funnel, right, to get emails, or if you're a company that does demos or sales calls, might as well do middle and bottom funnel content and bring them into that funnel. And yeah, I think conversion is a good thing. I mean, it's not what you want to do for every piece of content, but for the majority of it, I think conversion is a big factor for blog content.
I mean, absolutely. So I do think I disagree with there's nothing to write about on the top of the funnel. I think the problem is for many companies is that they don't think about the unique angles, right? There is no, like, you're correct. I mean, do we need one more article about what is storytelling? No. But do we need an article on how do you tell business stories if you only have an iPhone? Or how do you tell stories if your device runs out of power? I mean, it has to be a totally dumb topic, right?
Yeah.
But like all these things, I mean, you have to really drill down. It can't be so high level. It can't be, or everybody has in their articles, what's the definition of blue, right? Like, so they think they're going to rank for the definition of blue, which, whatever, you got to dive a little deeper.
You're thinking like a journalist.
How do you make that work? So talk about where to start. You mentioned the website. Does the homepage, does the homepage still matter?
Yeah, I think so. I think every different businesses have different purposes for the homepage, and so we have 3 or 4 kinds. We have the e-commerce homepage, which is uniquely designed and developed for e-commerce sites, and that's different than your regular B2B or SaaS company, which is kind of has its own. You have the newsy type homepage, which I saw a thread on Twitter about Pew Research and how they created their homepage, which is full of news articles. And then you have what I call the story homepage, which a lot of solo brands will do because story is central to their business. So I do think homepage is important. The homepage is like a foyer in the house. I heard somebody describe it one time. People are coming in, you want to welcome them, and then you want to give them an opportunity to know where they need to go. So do they need to see the services? Do they need to see the pricing page? Do they need to go look at the blog? You want to make that stuff pretty clear. And you also want at the top of that to have your most clear benefit statement, one line, value proposition, whatever word you want to use for that. And you want that there. And I like to say, you might consider starting with the about page because everything, at least the way I do it, everything you do for the home page, you do for the about page. Plus, you do that little self company introspection that you have to do for an about page. Those two pages are crucial. And I know a lot of people dismiss the about page. I love about pages, but I thought about this a while back. SEO has the schema tags, which a lot of people use. There is one for an about page. That'll tell you how important at least Google thinks about pages are. But usually, if you look at your analytics, you'll see that the about page is probably the second most visited page. So yeah, the home and about pages are obviously very, very crucial.
They're still important, even if some people think they're not. I think it always depends on what model you're running, right? Like what your company is. And I like on my blog, christophtrapp.com, there isn't really a product page of anything, right? I mean, there's not much you can really hire me for at this stage, So my articles get by far the most traffic, and nobody really goes to the homepage to skim the articles. I mean, some people do that, but not really. But again, I'm not offering a service. I'm not selling a product. I'm not doing anything like that. I'm really just sharing content on there and building that up for the time being. So it always depends. We got about 4 minutes left here. Tell us about, you created a framework to get copy on your website. How does that work? How do people work with you? How do they use that framework, and how do they get it?
Well, I think you have the link, but copyflight.com/WCF, which stands for Website Copy Framework, is kind of the landing page for that. And it is sold on Gumroad. It's a series of checklists or worksheets, I should say, which allows people to kind of sit down and think about the things. They may still need to do some research, like when it comes to benefits and features. You might want to talk to your customers and that kind of thing. But it's a place to document all that. And either you can take that once you've documented it all, and it's like a repository of micro copy, right? Of all this stuff that you need to have, because what we find is that when people try to do write their own website copy, they tend to just open up, Google Documents or Word or whatever, and then they stare at a blank page. They don't know what to do. So it's like building blocks. And I think a famous copywriter said that copywriting is assembly, not writing, or something like that. And it really is assembly. I like to look at Lego blocks, right? You're building your Lego blocks, and you're going to build your house from that. So that's what the Website Copy Framework does. It helps you build the Lego blocks that you can then take and turn into website copy. And I do offer a simple framework, which is based on some very classic copywriting formulas. And so you can either take that to a writer and have them to write it for you. You can put it in the hands of somebody in-house if you've got a good writer in-house. But it's just kind of like a self-reflective time, right? Or company reflective, who is our target customer? What do we solve for them? What are their problems? Those kinds of things. And you get to document that in the worksheets, and you pull them all together, and you can write your.
And I'm always a big fan of checklists and those kind of things. And many of the checklists I use, they're in my head, right? I mean, like when we go live, I got like this checklist I'm going through, and like I got to do this. Okay, I'm checking. but I've done it enough times now, right? I mean, 510 episodes or whatever it's been, where sometimes I forget things. I forget to tell the guest that we fist bump when we come on air. So I send them a message when the opening runs and whatever. But why is this deeper, or why do we need a checklist that's written down? Is it just because of the complexity, or because we don't do it every day? Why is that necessary?
That last phrase might be it. We don't do it every day. And basically what I did was I took my process and kind of productized it and put it in worksheets. And I originally, my thinking was, some of my website developer friends, they have a client that needs to get a website launched. They need to get it launched themselves because a lot of times their last payment is dependent on it. And their client is dragging their feet because they don't know how to write the website copy. And they can take this and either walk through it with them, or they can just hand it off. And one of my friends in the web developer world said that one of her clients said, I didn't know what to do, but now I can do this, just because he handed them the website copy framework. It just gives them a roadmap. And if somebody doesn't do this regularly, if they don't do it 100 times, what do you have, like 500 episodes for this thing? You know what to do. But about a new podcaster getting in, and I have several podcaster friends, but I know one who's actually put out a checklist for new podcasters because, and I'm a new podcaster basically. And I'm starting to get my routine down and that kind of thing. But you take an expert podcaster and they give out a little checklist, even if it's a freebie or even if they just charge for it, it's big help for someone who's brand new. And I think it's the same situation with this.
Yep. Fantastic. Check out the checklist, copyflight.co, I believe, right? .com. And Todd, thanks for joining me today, and thanks for sharing your insights. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
That's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. Please rate and review our show on your favorite podcast channels. And don't forget to share this episode with your networks. We appreciate you. Until next time, let the best stories win.